I feel like Brian never thought that he was going to be enough.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Gabby Petito, was it worth it? A huge amount of moolah was spent on equipment and resources by the Northport authorities. That's aside from what was spent in Wyoming. And it amounted to about over $100,000, according to a recent article in the Northport Sun. And I will put a link to that article in the description. For those who haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So the article describes the pay of investigators skyrocketing between September and October this year. And bear in mind, during these fateful 2 months, just September and October, the Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie cases played out. It started with a focus on Gabby before all eyes turned on the Laundrie home, and everyone wanted to know where Brian Laundrie could possibly be. If you think about it, the Gabby and Brian's story actually started long before that, but the end game of their story basically started playing out in early July as well as August. Right, for those 2 months that they were on the road trip. And by October, when the road trip would have come to an end, that was sort of when I don't want to call it a brouhaha, I don't want to minimize it, but where the high profile nature of this case started to subside, right, in October and then eventually in November. All of America watched as investigators went hither and yon. This was especially during October, turning every stone they possibly could over in Florida, speeding and whizzing through the water and airspace of the expansive Colton Reserve. You had bounty hunters on the scene. You had members of the public shouting and kind of going crazy, and all of this went so far as someone almost shooting a Brian Laundrie lookalike on the Great Appalachian Trail. That happened on October 18th, right? Almost a month ago now. Just 4 days after that, Brian Laundrie's remains were found during what seemed like a perfunctory search. There was not a lot of manpower during that particular search. It was in an area previously identified by the fugitive's parents, and during that search there were no drones, no helicopters, no amphibious vehicles, and no other specialized equipment was used, no infrared devices or ground-penetrating radar or even cadaver dogs. In the end, it was ordinary people who found Laundrie's remains, and in plain sight, not dogs. And so this begs the question, were the resources employed in the search worth it? And I think it's an important question. In a perfect world, we would like to imagine that authorities would spare no expense to see justice done. America can sometimes seem like a perfect world with some of the best funded law enforcement on the planet. And certainly when I observed the Moab incident, I thought, wow, I wish we had some of that kind of manpower in my country when someone sees something. You could have a lot of people on the scene and they've got body cams and all that kind of thing. In any event, with the world watching, it seemed only right that a petty thing like money wouldn't stand in the way of the tidal way of a nation's curiosity and, yes, its hunger for justice. Oh yes, and answers. And in the end, the answers did come. Gabby Petito's remains were found. Ultimately, Brian's were found either as well. But we didn't really get a full sense of exactly what has happened in either Brian or Gabby's case. But I think it is, although we don't know the details, we know in general what was going on. They were in love. They were in a tense relationship. Things and tensions were escalating, and things unraveled, right? We know that. We know that much. I've just come back from a 2-week trip, and I can't imagine being away for 2 months. And I wasn't working. So although I enjoyed the trip that I was on, there were stresses. There's quite a lot of money that is spent being away from home just for 2 weeks. So can you imagine that for 4 months, even if you're trying to take care of your expenses, right? So I certainly felt that aspect. It's not just the person you're with, it's also the finances, that is a factor. So the other thing is, in reality, very few cases get the sort of attention or resources that the Petito case has gotten. And I think it is good when cases get this sort of attention, because it's good to think about justice. It's good to care about justice. It's good to care about a fellow human being. It's also good to see why does a particular case, why do people in a particular case resonate with us. And I know with Gabby Petito, I just thought, wow, this refreshing young woman just trying to innocently live her life in this very fresh, sweet way. She didn't deserve this kind of thing, right? And so you want to know why, and you are indignant that something so horrible happened to someone that really didn't seem to deserve what happened to her. Not that anyone does, but it just seemed particularly abominable in this case. It seemed particularly, I don't even want to say inappropriate, it seemed particularly atrocious. But whatever your reasons were for paying attention to this case, the good news is when we do pay attention, often these cases get resolved fairly quickly. There's a lot of attention, a lot of focus, and the answers do come. We saw that in the Cleo Smith case in Australia, which had a sort of a turnaround time of 18 days, which is relatively short. And in the Petito case, although we don't have as many answers as we want, and there's still some answers we're looking for, we know quite a lot about what probably went down during those 2 fateful months near the end of the American summer in the year 2021. So after about 2 months, we knew a lot of the answers there. Unfortunately, there are some cases which, despite being high profile, still simply defy the odds, such as Summer Wells, missing now for well over 5 months, and Madeleine McCann, who's been missing for 15 years next year, apparently. I say missing in inverted commas because I'm not sure if she really is missing. I'm not sure if she's missing in the sense that some people believe. In any event, the latter case, the Madeleine McCann case, has already cost over £12.5 million. That's almost $17 million, $16.74 million. And, if the price for the search of Madeleine seems exorbitant, if you compare $16.7 million to, so it's $16,740,000 compared to $100,000 for the search for Brian and Gabby. Bear in mind that the Netflix documentary just about the search for Madeleine cost almost twice as much as the search for Madeleine. So the Netflix documentary cost £20 million, and after 15 years, the search for Madeleine has only cost £12 million. A lot of money, but compare that to the amount of money to make a documentary about her, right? So mainstream movies these days cost easily upwards of 20 times the budget of the Madeleine McCann documentary. In 2019, about $400 million was spent, for example, on Avengers Endgame. And I'm only quoting these numbers to make us aware of the huge amounts of money that are spent on entertainment and on simple pleasures, I guess, compared to $100,000 spent on Gabby Petito, which seems to be important, doesn't it? So with those sorts of numbers in mind, it feels like it makes sense to spend more rather than less on fighting for justice, doesn't it? So on the question, was $100,000 well spent on the Gabby Petito case, the answer feels like yes, but given how Brian Laundrie was ultimately found, ridiculously close to home, something like less than 4 miles from his home, and to some extent he was sort of stumbled upon by his own family members. It wasn't like it took a crack team to, with specialized equipment to find him. Maybe more money ought to be spent not on equipment and actual searching. I'm not saying spend less money. I'm saying spend more money perhaps on other things such as thinking, brainstorming. Strong strategic thinking can also save time, resources, and equipment. So why not invest more on the more cerebral side of things in future? So for example, when I say thinking, you could spend some of your money on sketching things and putting information together rather than and paying for the situation where important people and thinkers, strategic thinkers, come together, rather than fueling a vehicle that is going to be flying around or driving around randomly in a certain respect. So, strong strategic thinking can save time, resources, and equipment. So why not invest more in that going into the future? That brings us to the next point. Can a human life be measured? While it may seem ethical not to put a price tag on a person's life or worth, in truth, people do so all the time. Life insurance is about measuring the value of a person's life in absentia. And kidnappings are all about the exchange of a person for money, and we're all familiar with that. We could talk about the health industry and what is happening right now with the world's health on a global scale and how much resources should be spent on this or that. But we ought not to lose sight of the fact that a single life lost is a tragedy. And if you're not sure it is, imagine if it was your life lost. Imagine someone took your life. And, should some money be spent on investigating it? One would hope so, wouldn't you? A single life lost is a tragedy and often an unnecessary one. And so it often feels as if we ought to spend resources dealing with injustice, whether it's people writing books, making documentaries, or actually pursuing injustice in court. Think about the idea of justice for the living. It feels like something that doesn't have a limited price tag. Justice for the living feels like it should have an unlimited price tag. And now let's play devil's advocate. I've seen at least 3 cases up close. So I've been in court with these individuals where these accused parties were prepared to burn their enormous treasures, basically liquidate their fortunes, untold millions, right, in their entirety, all of their money, and going straight into their defense lawyers' pockets if only their defense counsel could wave a magic wand and pull off some sort of magic trick. Just sort of a thing where no amount of money was too much to ask. Give the lawyer all your money and maybe he can save you. Well, I'm prepared to do that. There's no price that can be put on this. And so you can see how an accused in this situation, a defendant, how important it is to fight for, their version of justice, to try and get themselves off the hook. So if they are willing to fight so hard, and perhaps they did do something wrong, what about the hunger for justice from the other side of the coin? The fight for justice from the perspective where someone dies and shouldn't have died. Do we have a similar hunger for justice? Do we? Should we? So I just wanted to touch on that particular case. I am back from my trip, so I'll be doing more regular YouTube videos. I might be doing a live or 2 this weekend. And I'm also continuing with the Treachery audiobook series on Patreon as from today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.